Decades from now, the biggest consumer brands in the world will not be the large corporate holding companies like Coke and Pepsi, but instead will be creator-led brands. Let me explain. Now, the textbook definition of a creator-led brand is essentially any brand that is started with kind of the name, image, and likeness of any famous celebrity or influencer. So think Logan Paul and KSI in their prime, Feastables by Mr. Beast, Fenty Beauty by Rihanna. These are individuals that at all time have massive amounts of attention across the digital and social ecosystem. And so their brands can burst onto the scene, not having to fight for consumer attention. Thanks to the mass market attention of their founders, these brands can burst onto the scene and immediately sell millions of dollars worth of product, all for no marketing cost. And the reason these brands will win is simple. It all comes down to attention. And the reason attention matters so much, this is nothing new. This has always been the case. And if you don't believe me, let's rewind and take a look at how these large corporate companies got to the size they have today. So first, how exactly did these companies get here? There's a few fundamental elements here. The first is what I would define as a moat, aka the difficulty that comes with developing any sort of consumer product. Now, 100 years ago, if you wanted to start a merch brand and be able to sell those products, it would have been incredibly difficult. You got to find a textile manufacturing company, you got to find the supplies for it. Nowadays, any kid, any high school kid can go create a Shopify website, drop ship the products through a platform like Printful, and immediately sell online with very minimal cost, very minimal time, and very minimal energy put into it. Additionally, there's supply chain. How do you get these products to your customers? Again, 150, 25 years ago, this was a lot more difficult than it is today. Then, of course, there's economies of scale, aka you need enough in terms of product development to be able to manufacture significant products, bringing down your cost so your margin can ultimately exist. Well, those economies of scale drastically change when you can immediately reach millions of potential customers. But despite all of the reasons that led to these corporate brands ultimately developing and getting here, why it was in fact so difficult, the biggest and most important reason why Coca Cola, Pepsi, why these brands are where they are today is advertising. You see, it's really easy for us to take for granted just how cheap advertising and marketing can be in the modern kind of economy. But if you really look back on it, if you were a brand launching in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, you name it, pre-internet era, how were you going to reach millions of potential customers? Are you going to sign a deal with every single local newspaper throughout the country and have your print ad get displayed to them? That's going to be pretty expensive. Are you going to run a television ad? We know how expensive those still are. Are you going to run it across the radio? Are you going to partner with not influencers? There's not thousands of people with influence. Who are you going to sign on? Elvis, Michael Jackson? There weren't individuals at that level that commanded that sort of attention. And so the advertising cost was the biggest reason why brands that wanted to compete at that level simply couldn't. If you were trying to launch a product to compete against Coca Cola or Pepsi in that era, how the hell were you going to compete with them? They would simply outbid you on any context in the marketing realm. The bottom line here is that what these corporate companies did to get here and the moat that they once had is dissolved. Now competition can come from just about anyone, which is why what we need to highlight next is the rise of creator culture. What the internet ultimately allowed for in social platforms is anyone in the world to be able to create content, build and establish an audience, and ultimately build a community that they cultivate. Fans, audience members, communities, whatever it is, you can build attention around the thing that you are doing. We see today that consumers are no longer connected to simply a brand, a corporate slogan, a logo. Because of the rise of ultimately a creator culture, we see that consumers are more connected to the influencers or celebrities that they follow, less than that of simply brands, logos, and corporate slogans that they come across online. The creator ecosystem has flipped branding on its head, which brings me to my final point and the reason why creators will win. It all comes down to co-creation and community. Big brands simply don't have the community of customers that creators already have. This means that big brands have to go out and hire companies like Deloitte, Accenture, McKinsey, others, spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year on consumer insights, data research, product testing, new product development. Whereas what we see from creators is quite different. Instead of doing focus groups and surveys that are quite outdated, they can measure where they should go based on where their audience, fans, and community are simply telling them to go. Quite literally, the comment section on TikTok and Instagram for the creators is the equivalent of the hundreds of millions of dollars spent by large brands to understand where they should be developing new products. Beyond understanding where we should go, it invites community members into the development process. They feel that they have a voice in the development of those products, of that brand, and you create a sense of co-creation with your end customers. The two most expensive line items for large brands, being advertising and consumer insights, simply get cut to zero for creator-led brands. Beyond the creator and influencer-led brands you see today, over the next decade ahead, you will continue to see more creators and influencers launch brands of their own. And we're not talking about a mild increase or acceleration here. We are talking about a significant multiple, not just the celebrities at the top 1% of the influencer chain, but rather any kid and their ability to launch their own cosmetic brand, their own merch brand. And for these corporate brands, it isn't as if, Logan Paul's Prime is going to defeat Gatorade, or that Mr. Beast Feastables is going to take down Hershey's chocolate empire, but rather it will be death by 1,000 cuts. It isn't the 1 or 2 or 5 creator-led brands that will bring down the huge empires. It is the thousands, the tens of thousands of customized, tailored products that can still compete in the world of supply chain and product development. But most importantly, their advertising cost is zero. Their ability to scale becomes quite infinite when that cost is so low. That's why creator brands will win.